the District 1 and 2 Independent Redistricting Commission community hearing. We're going to start the meeting with roll call. Honorable Chair Johnson.
Present.
Honorable Commissioner Khan.
Present.
And Honorable Commissioner Alan White.
Present.
All right. And welcome to everyone. Usually the next parts are called by the person moderating the meeting rather than myself. Ms. Sosa Costa?
Yes, and so for some housekeeping items, we wanted to let the public know that we have translation services available in Spanish and American Sign Language, and that we will also have public comment available during today's agenda, as well as time for questions at the end. Para las personas que deseen escuchar esta presentación en español, favor de seguir las siguientes indicaciones. Primero, hasta abajo de su pantalla se encuentra un pequeño mundo. Mueva su cursor encima del mismo. Segundo, aparecerá una ventana indicando inglés o español. Tercero, presione español. Listo. Podrá usted escuchar la voz del intérprete en español. Next slide, please. During today's agenda, we will begin with public comment, and following that, we will also be providing to the public some information regarding letters given as public comment to the IRC. In addition to that, we will continue on to the approval of meeting minutes from a prior public hearing, and then onto the agenda, main agenda for the meeting, discussion of future public hearings, a presentation update from city staff, a presentation from the city's demographer, and then a discussion of future agendas for other public hearings.
So we are at public comment section now. If you wanted to add anything, Ms. Sosa Costa.
Have anyone who is present who would like to provide public comment?
So if you are attendee, if you can raise your hand if you'd like to speak. It looks like we have one attendee raising your hand. If there's anyone else, go ahead and raise your hands. We'll start with the Judge Frank Ochoa. How this will work is I will unmute you, and you will unmute yourself, and we'll allow 10 minutes to speak per speaker. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Judge Frank Ochoa, and you may begin.
Thank you. Welcome to my former bench colleagues who I haven't seen for a while, but good to see you again. Thank you. I'd written a letter a couple days ago to the mayor and council and copied the committee members on that. I hope you received that. I sent it to the email address that was designated as a person who could forward that to you. The basic import of the letter was a request that your activities be postponed until we had a clear understanding regarding the insertion of the Banyalas versus City of Santa Barbara orders and the judgment for that case. I considered in the process, and I'll note that I have talked to my friend. He's indicated that we'll work together and set up a process where the city's consultant will work with the District Elections Committee, whose members include several of the plaintiffs from the Banyalas case, to try to affect the intent of the orders from the court case to the fullest extent possible, given all of the considerations that would be at issue in drawing districts. And based on his representations in that regard, I would withdraw a request that the proceedings before the commission be postponed. If we wanted to note that for the record and thank Mr. Clone for his offer to work together to resolve this issue.
Very good. Next, we have the Resilience Institute. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and you can begin speaking.
Good evening, members of this Redistricting Commission. My name is Jacqueline Inda. I am here in representation of the District Elections Committee, as Judge Ochoa, former retired Judge Ochoa, mentioned. I'm here just to voice my concern with this process and the fact that within our stipulated agreement, as me being one of the plaintiffs or potential plaintiffs of this process, created a section in the stipulation that identified the fact that these maps should not be changed unless and only if necessary to increase the populations to 50% in the case that those 50% populations of majority minority communities were decreased with a census. And it seems like in all of these maps that are proposed, the decrease is apparent instead of increasing to those 50% populations. I understand that there may be some challenges in getting to the 50%, but that doesn't mean that we create different maps to decrease the current percentages, but rather the map should be only modified to increase it as I read it. And so I really urge you to work with the District Elections Committee, have us have access to the modification of these maps as we did in the past, so that we could potentially help this process get to that 50% on both District 1 and District 3. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Very good. Next we have Helene Schneider. And then if anyone else wishes to speak, go ahead and raise your hand in the apps and I will unmute you. We'll start with Helene Schneider. We'll go ahead and unmute you, unmute yourself, and you can begin speaking.
Thank you. And thank you to Honorable Judges Johnson, Kahn, and White for doing this work. I know it takes a lot of time. My name is Helene Schneider. I'm the former mayor of Santa Barbara. I was served in office as mayor from 2010 to 2018. And I hope you had a chance to review a letter that I sent along with my former council colleagues, Dale Francisco and Bendy White. Really just wanted to give you some context, historical context, as I'm sure City Attorney Ariel Kalan can tell you his perspective from 2015 when we went through this. But going through the whole process, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of the context in your review. And so hopefully that will help in your deliberations and analysis of the maps. I'm not going to read the whole letter I sent, but I do want to just for the record put in some main points of that. Of course, this all started through the lawsuit from, as was already mentioned, to the California Voting Rights Act. And we wanted to, in a settlement agreement, make sure that we abided by the settlement and worked with the plaintiffs, of course, and have as robust of a public process as possible. And I think we were able to do that pretty well in 2015. We had multiple public hearings. We had a first hearing describing how to use the map tools, over 100 people attending, 135 members of the public created user accounts, and we received over 16 alternate maps in addition to the 3 drafts that was created by the consultant at the time. That then turned into a number of different public hearings for review and comment. And some of the things, because of that big process and public process, There were some consensus issues that also came up in addition to creating the majority minority districts that we now have in districts 1 and 3. One was how looking at State Street in the downtown core and a consensus that State Street should have representation from as many council members as possible. As we put in the letter, it's not by accident that State Street's bordered by all 6 districts somewhere, 4 districts in the downtown core by districts 1, 2, 3, and 6, and 2 districts on Upper State Street, districts 4 and 5. We felt that as State Street's the major economic and cultural engine of the city, we also agreed that each council member should be accountable to a portion of the constituents in that area. We also took that same approach with the waterfront where we could. 2 of the 6 districts, land-based more like District 3 and 6, we couldn't do that without creating strange, boundaries, but districts 1, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4, and 5 does have a little bit of the waterfront as well, because that's looking at the city as a whole in the waterfront. And then we also talked about, as the council and some of the members of the public have looked at each district to include both areas that had residential and commercial areas in addition to the State Street area. So District 1 includes the Milpas corridor. District 2 includes Meigs and Cliff Drive intersection. District 3 included the San Andres Mitchell-Torrena Street area. District 4 includes Coast Village Road. District 5 includes Upper De La Vina and the airport. And District 6 includes Mission De La Vina area and Cottage Hospital. So hopefully this context of what we went through a very strenuous and big public process back in 2015, we want to help you in doing your work, and happy to answer any questions, but thank you again for the work here that you're doing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Brandon. I can then continue on to the next item, in which I was going to publicly speak on a few of the different letters that have been received as public comment and then sent to the IRC. So as some of the speakers tonight have already said, we've received a letter dated January 18, 2022 from Singer, Spicen, and Dunkel. And this is on behalf of the plaintiffs in the Banales et al. Versus City of Santa Barbara case. And in addition to that, as the speaker has already mentioned, we also received a letter dated January 18th, 2022 from several individuals, including former Mayor Helene Schneider, former City Council member of Santa Barbara, Dale Francisco, and former City Council member of Santa Barbara, Harwood Bendy White. And lastly, we also received a letter dated, I believe this was January 12th, yes, 2022, on behalf of the Citizens Planning Association from Mel Brooks, the president of the Citizen Planning Association. Now, these letters have not yet been uploaded to the redistricting website. However, they are available upon public request. Thank you.
Are we ready to move on to the next item then, the approval of the minutes?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Apologies. Yeah, we're ready to move on to approval of minutes. No, you're on.
All right. I have received them. I assume the other commissioners have received them. Any comments, questions, clarifications from Judge Khan or Judge White?
Not from Judge White.
All right. Motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Any opposed? All right, they're approved unanimously. Thank you.
We'll move on to the first item, discussion of future public hearings.
Honorable Chair, if I may, you previously have seen that we had to switch to a remote virtual hearing given the ongoing pandemic and the rise of the Omicron variant. And so we definitely wanted to provide an opportunity for the honorable commissioners to discuss what method would be best to use for future public hearings and whether you wanted to continue virtual hearings or a hybrid.
I'm going to withhold any thoughts I might have and call on my fellow commissioners first for their comments. Judge White.
I think it's a shame that we can't have public hearings and be all in the same room and listen to one another. The circumstances are the circumstances. I don't know if we want to consider a postponement, given that the next election isn't until November of 2024, in the hopes that perhaps Omicron subsides and we're able to meet in person. That's really the issue, I think.
Ms. Khan.
Yeah, I mean, I concur. You know, the public health officer for the county, I believe it's the county of Santa Barbara, issued some recommendations. They became, you know, highly regarded. The school had to act accordingly. And I noticed that I think four of our meetings were set at different school locations and 2 at public park locations. But I've got to believe that even as to the park locations, if they're run by city recreation and parks, that they're going to abide by any recommendations that are strongly urged by the county public health officer. So we're kind of held hostage to those mandates. And if we have to meet by Zoom, we have to meet, because we all recall we had to amend the city charter to create new deadlines. And even though these elections won't be affected by our decisions until sometime in the future, those deadlines are certainly mandates that we have to abide by.
I have one question in light of what both Judge Khan and Judge White have said, and that is, and believe me, I'm a person who's masked and away from everyone and won't hug anybody, but are there alternative sites that are not public buildings that might be treated differently? And I'm only inquiring, I'm not advocating for it. I'm just inquiring to see if we have other in-person alternatives. And the second thought that I had was, can we safely leave, or without huge expectations of disappointment, leave some of the public meetings that are counted a little later on in place, reschedule these after it? I don't know the answer to either of those questions. I just raised them as thoughts. Yeah, I'm looking to the city because clearly the commissioners don't have those answers.
Chair Johnson, we can look into whether or not there would be alternative locations that would be available. Honorable Khan made a very good point in that many of the public hearings that we have scheduled for the coming months were originally intended to be at certain school locations, which would no longer be possible given the Omicron variant and the ongoing pandemic. But we can look into alternative locations and get back to you on that. As far as rescheduling, that would be up to the commission given the deadlines.
So let me ask that question first. Two other questions, I guess. One is, we've already extended the deadlines. It was a fair amount of work for staff to do all that had to be done to accomplish that. And I assume it will be the same amount of work again if we try to do that. And then for the commissioners, my question to you is, as preferable as it is, significantly preferable to have in-person meetings such as this, I think you're likely to get a bigger turnout than Zoom. How does that balance with you against delay, having them in a more timely manner, but maybe in a less desirable manner versus, I assume, having to seek another delay in a formal manner to accomplish our work and then be able to do these in person? Well, and reminding ourselves last, in March of 2020, we all thought we'd be back in person in June of 2020. And then when we got vaccines, we thought March of 2021, and yet here we are. Judge Khan, do you have any thoughts on the balancing on that?
Well, I think, we've all made plans given the dates that were announced early on. And so in between, I've planned other things, and certainly all of us have calendars that, in addition to the very important work we do for the city, we have other things that are calendared in between. So with regard to changing the dates, I would be opposed to that. But with regard to finding other locations that are not, controlled by county mandates that still provide for the safety that we need to accord the public and ourselves, I'm all for that. If we're able to meet in person and still provide for the safe attendance of the attendees and allow them to be heard in a much more suitable environment. But then that's up to the city, I suppose, to see if they can locate in such a short period of time. I think the next meeting that we have planned, is that on March the 3rd?
Isn't there something in February?
The next meeting is February 12th.
Well,
February
Saturday,
12th,
right?
okay. So 2/12 and then March 3rd.
Judge White, any thoughts on the balancing issue there?
My thoughts are that we might even be able to find a suitable outdoor location that was covered or perhaps tented, where we could get adequate ventilation, satisfy the health department requirements, have microphones, have people attending, social distancing even in a tent. I think we can accomplish it. I think we just need to be creative. Nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what's happening. I hear there may be another variant after this one. So my thoughts are, I like the idea of a suitable location, but I think that suitable location should also consider the possibility of an outdoor location, perhaps tented.
So continuing the dates is not your first choice.
I considered it and I thought, well, we've got the next election is March of 2024, but we have these mandates and we went through a lot of gymnastics to extend the dates, and here we are. And again, no crystal ball. So we may want to just move forward, but find a suitable location. The more we discuss it, I think the more that seems to be the viable option.
I think that's what's bubbling up to the surface, and for me as well. And I do not know if this is viable, but potentially it wouldn't be city property or school district property or Parks and Rec property, but a private property. I don't know how appropriate or inappropriate the city might find that, but I don't know exactly what it would be. A restaurant with an outdoor patio or something along those lines that might be suitable. Would that be a possibility, Ms. Sosa Acosta? I don't know what's viable for the city.
Can definitely look into that and get back to you. I have here noted that an outdoor location with plenty of ventilation and a use of microphones would be helpful. We can look into what is available.
Okay. Well, I think the consensus that we've sort of talked ourselves into is we would like to keep these dates for several reasons, our own, the cities, the laws, but try to find a live location if we possibly can. Otherwise, if we really can't, we'll proceed by Zoom. Does that summarize it on behalf of the commissioners?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And so next, I wanted to provide an update on behalf of the city of our public outreach efforts during and before the map drawing period. And so as you all know, we provided a few different online mapping tools for the public to be able to submit publicly submitted maps. In addition to that, we try to bring awareness and encourage public participation through various means. The city posted flyers throughout all districts and at various businesses and government agencies within the districts. In addition to that, the city also had various media types of releases, such as publications and announcements over the radio, on newspapers such as The Independent, paid print advertising, and city news and brief articles. In addition to that, the city also sought to bring awareness and engage the public through various social media platforms. All of this to say that as of yesterday, January 19th, 2022, we have not yet received any draft maps submitted by the public. And so in today's presentation of the draft maps, you will notice that they are maps created by our demographer, NDC.
Any questions or comments from the commission about the outreach?
No.
No?
You know, I did want to mention the one comment that was made in one of the letters we received, that there had not been any proposed maps, and the writer attributed that to ineffective outreach methods. And I suppose that is possible. I just have a sense that there may be some satisfaction with the districts more or less as they are, so it didn't generate the same amount of interest as it did in 2015. I see that as a possibility. And honestly, I also see just civic mindedness fatigue being a possibility too. People have been faced with one crisis after another in their public lives, and that may be hindering how much response we're getting to the public outreach that's been done. But I did want to ask the question that letter raised, which was about not setting forth the requirement in the agreement that there be 2 majority-minority districts. Can you comment on whether that was mentioned in any of the outreach materials?
It was not, but we did get the commentary you heard from Judge Ochoa, Your Honor. I wanted to add a comment, if I might. I think between the 3 letters, while it is only 3 letters, you have a pretty good cluster of the issues that were faced by the city, both in 2015 and now. As Judge Ochoa said, we agree that the intention expressed in 2015 was to create 2 majority-minority districts, but the intention was also expressed to create lawful districts that abided by both state and federal regulations. So I think focusing on those clusters of issues would keep us plenty busy, at least until your February hearing, at which point we may have a better focus for you on where your greatest study ought to be.
Thanks. Anything else in the commissioners before the map discussion?
Mr. Coloni, to the extent that this is a work in progress and we're receiving input and we're also looking at what has been drafted, it's not written in stone, is it? That only 3 options that have been produced so far are the limits of what's going to be presented, but rather because it is a work in progress, because we are going to be looking at what needs to be done in conformity with the Banala's order and judgment, and to the extent that we receive other public comments about areas that are of interest to the residents and what we need to do to, alter the boundaries in some way to accommodate. There may be 2 or 3 other proposed maps that in considering all this input are required to be made. Would that be a fair statement that the 3 that have been proposed are just samples of what allows us to consider as a point of reference for present as well as future discussion?
That's absolutely correct, Your Honor. Not only might the public submit additional maps, the commission itself may well direct the demographer to try different approaches as you hear more information.
Judge White, anything else you'd like to comment on?
No, I was just reviewing the letters, and it seems like there's a strong number of individuals represented by the Citizens Planning Association that wants to basically keep things as they were in 2015. And then there's a completely different view. And I think we have to consider those views and incorporate people's thoughts and look at it and rely on the demographer to help us.
You know, Mr. Clun, you just mentioned that the commission might suggest or direct that our experts look at something a little bit differently. One of the things I wrote down in red at the last minute meeting was that our role is to select a map, not draft one, for which I was very grateful. But at the same time, I think what I just heard you say is we might, among ourselves, determine some direction we would like them to explore, correct?
Yes, but my recollection is that not drafting maps meant that we were not expecting the commission to grab the computer and start drawing maps rather than specifying content.
Okay.
You know, relative to the numbers that I'm reading in each of the NDC plans and how perhaps NDC Plan 102 is maybe at least partially in satisfaction of that judgment and order. And to the extent that District 3 can be modified in conformity with what is perceived to be the need to have 50% I do have some thoughts, and should I wait to hear the presentation before expressing those thoughts, or am I allowed to make them at this time?
I think we're allowed to speak as we wish. I was thinking we'd hear from them first, but I don't want to stifle you in any way, Judge Conn.
Well, then I'll wait until after the presentation.
Okay.
And Honorable Chair, I think we have a member of the public that would like to speak if we want to open public comment for this item.
All right.
If there's any other members of the public that want to speak to this item, please raise your hand in the app. We have Megan Turley who would like to speak. So I'm going to unmute yourself, and you may begin speaking.
This is the first time I've been on the other side of this, so this is fun to figure out Zoom on this end. My name is Megan Turley. I am the Vice Chair of the Santa Barbara Independent Redistricting Commission for the county. And I would just like to recommend that the commission avoid the assumption that folks don't want to be part of this process because of the lack of currently submitted maps. Once we were really able to get our outreach off the ground and get focus on the actual meetings themselves, we got an incredible response from the public. So I highly recommend keeping up on your outreach efforts. You're doing a great job already. As a commissioner for the county in 2021, I can attest that continued outreach is absolutely crucial, especially now that our county process has come to a close. It's a little bit less confusing as to where they're going to be submitting maps. And I'd also just like to encourage the commission to seriously consider the 2 minority-majority districts, if possible, to equitably draw them within the city. It's certainly not the case that the 3 maps that are presented today are the only options, and I encourage you to leave open the option to alter the boundaries based on community of interest feedback. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Ms. Turley.
Thank you.
Honorable Commissioner, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. We can move on.
All right, thanks.
Now we will have the city's demographer, NDC, present on the preliminary draft maps.
Good evening, Honorable Commissioners. My name is Daniel Phillips, and I'm a consultant with National Demographics Corporation. I am joined by my colleague, Douglas Johnson, and I will be leading the presentation tonight. Dr. Johnson will be here until 7, so if you have any questions for him, feel free to ask him before then. But what I'm going to do now is go through this presentation, and then I'll be taking questions at the end. So next slide, please. So that's just the title slide. So one more, please. So when it comes to the redistricting rules and goals, it's important to really be clear about what they are so that is on the same page and the understands what restrictions we are bound by. And so the very first is that these districts have to be equal in population. And that means all people counted by the census in 2020. And that would include children and non-citizens. And it would also include prisoners reallocated to their last known residential address. So we have a certain level of toleration that is traditional by the courts, which is 10% population deviation between the most populated and least populated districts. Next is to be mindful of the Federal Voting Rights Act, involved not diluting the voting strength of any protected class group of people, those who are historically marginalized or disadvantaged, and giving them the opportunity to candidates of their choice. But on the flip side, not practicing what is called racial gerrymandering, where you make race or ethnicity the only or main consideration when drawing districts. So you want to be mindful of the other criteria, specifically the state criteria that you'll see in the next column. So these are laid down by the Fair Maps Act, and they're actually in a rank order. So the most important ones are on top. If ideally you'd want to try to adhere to all of them, but if it's not possible, you would want to prioritize the higher ones. So the very first is to draw that are contiguous, just one piece each. Second is to not divide neighborhoods and communities of interest, which are socioeconomic geographic areas that should be kept together for their effective and fair representation. A third is to follow easily identifiable boundaries like major roads, creeks, ridge lines, freeway, etc. And fourth is to draw compact districts that do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. And finally, to not favor or discriminate against a political party. Lastly, there are other traditional redistricting principles that you may consider, as long as they are not at the expense of the federal and state criteria. And so one of those is to minimize voters shifted to different election years. Second is to respect voters' choices or continuity in office. A third is to account for future population growth. And fourth is to preserve the core of existing districts. So in my analysis, which is to follow, I will be focusing on the federal and state criteria, but I'm happy to speak to other traditional redistricting principles if you would like to put those under consideration. So next slide, please. First, what I want to show you is a map of the neighborhoods of the city. And these are actually neighborhoods that are defined by the city itself. So this is a good starting place when it comes to thinking about neighborhoods to be mindful of when it comes to the state criteria and to minimize the division of neighborhoods. So you'll see the draft maps that neighborhood boundaries and names are displayed. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to communities of interest, that can be a little more nebulous because unlike with neighborhoods, there is no official city definition for what communities of interest are. And so what you see here are just potential examples, all of which can be found on the story map, which has been created for this project. And you can see, if you go to that link, examples of all of these, which includes the central business district, various historic districts, school attendance areas, fire hazard zones, zip code areas, land use and zoning areas, and concentrations of certain socioeconomic interests, such as those who speak Spanish at home, families with children at home, those with income greater than $1,000 or higher, those with a bachelor's degree or higher, those who live in multifamily housing, and those who live in renter housing. And so you see here where those tend to be concentrated. Next slide, please. What you see on this slide is the current plan. And there are a few key statistics that you see at the bottom right-hand corner. The first of which is the total population deviation, which is just over 20%. And if you recall, we want that number to be under 10% in order for the districts to be considered equal in population. So it is not legally permissible to remain with the current plan. So the other statistics you'll see are the percentage of the citizen voting age population that is Latino in the two districts of interest where they are particularly concentrated, as mainly districts 1 and 3. And you'll see that as we have it, those numbers are 49% in District 1 and 45% in District 3. Now, the one thing I want, you can go to the next slide, please. So a brief analysis of the current plan. Like I said, it's when it comes to equal population, we have an imbalance. Districts 1 and 3 are underpopulated. District 3 is the most underpopulated at -11%. So it needs to expand somehow, while District 4 is overpopulated by just under 10%. So when you add those absolute values together, you get 20, and it needs to be less than 10. And for Voting Rights Act considerations, I mentioned the citizen voting age population statistics. Contiguity, all 6 districts are contiguous. Santa Barbara Airport is connected to District 5 via a strip of city territory that runs to the ocean. So that will have to be connected to some district, and as it stands now, it's District 5. Neighborhoods and communities of interest. There are some neighborhoods, based on the city's definition, that seem to be substantially split, namely Laguna, West Downtown, Lower State, and West Side. And there are potential communities of interest that are substantially split, including the Central Business District, the Historic District, the waterfront area, and what you call Greater San Roque. There are 2 neighborhoods, one's called West San Roque, I believe, and the other's called East San Roque. And so you might consider them one San Roque together. But I do want to say that I want to emphasize the potential there, because it may be the case that some of these communities of interest would in fact be better represented by multiple council members. So state law only requires that a community of interest be kept whole if it would benefit from having only one council member. So a case could be made that something like the waterfront area or the Central Business District would be better served by having multiple representatives on the council. And next point is easily identifiable boundaries. The district, there are some boundaries that seem to follow more minor streets rather than major streets. And finally, compactness. All 6 districts seem to be reasonably compact. So next slide, please. So what we have done is come up with 3 proposed plans. And like what was said earlier, these are just starting points, and we welcome suggested revisions or alterations, or if you want a brand new plan. But they kind of proceed in an order, starting with one you might call the minimal change plan, and then progressing to moderate and more substantial change. I would say that for all three of our plans, we maintain the current district architecture of having the east side in District 1, the west, the Mesa in District 2, the west side in District 3, the Riviera in District 4, and Upper State in District 5, and downtown in District 6. So you won't find any radical change from that existing architecture in any of the three plans. But starting with Plan 101, District 1 expands eastward toward Eucalyptus Hill at the expense of 4. But I do want to point out that we're not actually going up the hill to get a very different neighborhood that is much different socioeconomically than what you have in the rest of the east side. What we're doing is getting a piece of the east side neighborhood that was not included in the original District 1. District 3 is expanding southward toward West Beach at the expense of District 2. And because District 3 needs to grow because it's underpopulated. And so the idea there was to expand it southward in order to give every district a piece of the coast, with the exception of District 6, which is landlocked. And the other benefit of this plan is that it gives every district a piece of State Street except for District 2, because District 3 has to expand southward. And so that speaks to one of the considerations mentioned by the former mayor about the importance of having that stake in State Street. So if you look at the statistics to the bottom right, you'll see that the total population deviation is 6.5%, so well under the 10% threshold. And you have a District 1 voting age population that is Latino of 49%, and a District 3 percentage of 41. If you recall, the current plan is 45% in District 3, so it does go down. And the reality is, because District 3 is underpopulated, it has to expand, and that are around it are less Latino in makeup, so that causes the percentage to decrease in order to meet the equal population standard in District 3. Go to the next slide. You'll see that we have a more moderate change from the current plan, where we have District 1 taking in more of the Laguna neighborhood, District 3 shifting west to take in almost all of the west side neighborhood. District 2 shifts east to take in the entire waterfront area out to Coast Village. And District 6 now includes the whole central business district and less of the Laguna neighborhood. Here we have a total population deviation just under 8%. And we get up to 51% Latino CVAP in District 1 and 40% in District 3. And lastly, we have Plan 103. If you go to the next slide, yeah. So this is a more significant change. But like I said, significant is a relative term because the core of each district remains the same. But District 1 takes in pretty much all of the Laguna neighborhood. District 3 takes in almost all of the west side neighborhood. District 2 shifts west to take in all of southwestern Santa Barbara. And District 5 shifts north to take in all of northwestern Santa Barbara. And so District 6 would lose the area north of Mission Street, which now ends up in District 4. But then District 6 gains the waterfront. So you connect those visitor serving commercial areas in downtown with those along the waterfront. And under this plan, it's a total population deviation of 8.5% and 49% Latino in District 1 and 40% in District 3. And I'll note there's Santa Barbara Airport is in District 2 under this plan and in District 5 under the other plans. Next slide, please. So an analysis of these plans, I already talked about the population numbers and the Latino numbers. All 6 districts are contiguous for all 3 plans. There are some splits of neighborhoods that are kind of unavoidable in order to meet the population standards. 103 probably does the best job of uniting the neighborhoods together, but there was an effort under each of the plans to do a better job of minimizing visions of neighborhoods than what you see in the current plan. So you do have under the next bullet for each plan talks about communities of interest, or COIs, that are split up and their potential communities of interest. Like I said, these may end up benefiting from having more than one representative. So maybe the waterfront area would be a good example of something that would actually benefit from multiple representatives. But the Plan 103 probably does the best job of uniting those potential communities of interest. And but you do have the high fire risk area split between 2 districts under that proposal. All 3 plans tend to follow the boundaries of neighborhoods or major streets and highways. And there may be some less compact districts under each of the plans, but that's the very last priority criterion. So it may be necessary to have a non-compact district in order not split as many neighborhoods and the voting rights issues, et cetera. So next slide, please. So this is our final slide, just prompting any questions you might have about the proposed plans. If there might be a plan that you prefer or have questions about, or might want to see revisions to. And lastly, just pointing out that we have an interactive review map where each of these plans is posted that you can go to zoom in and explore each plan in depth. So thank you for your attention and happy to take your questions.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it occurred to me in reading some of the letters that we were given copies of, in particular, a letter from Judge Ochoa that I guess upon his own review of the 3 plans, he had only concluded that maybe one appears to have been consistent with the stipulated judgment and order. And I have to presume he's referring to your NDC Plan 102 in that it shows that District 1 has 51% Hispanic citizen voting age population, but that District 3 does not. And so, I don't know in particular what that judgment and order says, but I'll assume it does say that the district needs to have 50% Hispanic citizen voting age population. So to the extent that that is, part of the agreement that we have to also address, in addition to complying with all these voting right and fair map requirements and election law requirements, it appeared to me, and you are all the experts, I'm certainly not, but in looking at the all of the numbers that were provided in support of each of the plans, I saw that the contiguous districts to District 3 which, as you said, was underpopulated. And with regard to the number of Hispanic citizen voting age population didn't achieve the 50% that appears to have been part of the agreement, that maybe something could be done with regard to the contiguous districts. And I'm referring to District 2 is contiguous, District 6 and maybe even District 5 is contiguous, to the extent that they have a percentage of Hispanic voting age residents, citizens in that district. My question then becomes, can it be swapped in that if any of the districts are drawn upon to take some of their populace so that 50% in District 3 can be reached, and if they should in return need to have population added back so that there's no violation of that 10% population deviation cap. Is that something where the numbers can be crunched, where Hispanics can be taken from the various contiguous districts, added to District 3 in order to achieve the 50%? And if there's a need to swap back residents from District 3 in return, that's something that could be accomplished. For example, District 2 has 18% Latino CVAP. And the other districts, District 5 and 6 probably have a number of Hispanic citizen voting age population as well that maybe could be drawn upon to achieve that 50% number, in addition to achieving, balance with regard to your having said that District 3 is underpopulated. So those are my comments.
I would tend to agree with Commissioner Khan. It seems to me that the intent of the parties as specified in the stipulated judgment is that there be 2 electoral districts in which Latino eligible voters constitute a majority. So the closest we get to is Plan 102, where we have 51%. Neither Plan 101 nor Plan 103 get us there. So it might be interesting to look at how we could adjust the borders to achieve 2 majority Hispanic districts. I don't know how that impacts the 10% deviation requirement, or no greater than 10% deviation requirement. So that I would agree with Commissioner Khan that we need to look at that.
Could I ask one other question? I assume when the districting was done in 2015 that there were in fact 2 majority-minority districts, and that shifting in population over the last 7 years accounts for those no longer being the case? Or, I mean, is it true that under the current redistricting, we don't have those districts anymore under the current districting?
Yeah, so if Dr. Johnson is still here, he may be able to speak to the question about the 2015 issue because he was present during that initial districting. And I know that those numbers were based on 2010 census data, which those might have changed. I only can tell you what the numbers are now as far as 2020 citizen voting age population data, and that would indicate that it's 49% for District 1 and 45% for District 3.
Yeah, and this is Doug Johnson. I would add to that, yes, at the time the map was adopted by the latest census data available then, District 3 was right at 50%. Latinos were 50% of the citizen voting age population. And in District 1, they were 53%. It should note that obviously populations move, there are lots of dynamics going on. those districts as drawn at the time of adoption are now, as you noted, very short. Between the two of them, districts 1 and 3 are short by 20% of the district. So they need to add essentially 1/5 of the district between the two of them. And both of them have declined to just by natural change. So that district 1 is now 49% and district 3 is 45%. So it is, and of course they were drawn with all the kind of compact, contiguous, heavily Latino neighborhoods already included in them. So that's the challenge that Dr. Phillips has been wrestling with as he tries to draw these lines, is how do you take a district that, or two districts that need to add a lot of people to them and that have just seen a change in their own dynamics where they're less Latino. And that's what we've been wrestling with in these 3 maps. There are no like heavily Latino neighborhoods bordering one that can easily be taken in, but there may be things we can do to kind of play around the edges and get a % or 2 here or there.
So could I ask Mr. Colon or anyone who was with the city in 2015, I have read through the settlement and the stipulation, as I'm sure the other commissioners have, but I've only read through it once, and it's a dense, detailed document or set of documents. And so I didn't pick up in my memory bank that there was a requirement for 2 majority minority districts. Is that the interpretation as compared to the hope of the agreement? Is that the requirement of the agreement?
Your Honor, I want to be relatively circumspect because we do have a demand from Judge Ochoa. What the settlement agreement appears to say is that it expresses our mutual intent, the cities and the plaintiffs, to create 2 majority minority districts, but also requires them to be in compliance with state and federal voting rights laws. So there is a duality there. And I believe, as Judge Ochoa said, that the expression of intent was intended to recognize that using race as a predominant factor in districting is unlawful as a potential equal protection violation. So we are taking into account race or ethnicity, but we are trying to avoid making that a predominant factor in the districting process. That's the duality as I understand it. I know Ms. Leone, our special counsel, is online. She may want to speak more about that for you if you wish.
I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot because I know conversations are ongoing, but I just wondered if how tied our hands might be. And it sounds as if, in general, there's still some flexibility.
Yes, and perhaps more importantly, Chair Johnson, ultimately your commission will have the interpretive duty to decide what that settlement compels and how the various districting criteria ought to fit together. So in all candor, you hold the power here as a commission.
I think that may determine a little bit about some future agendas then. Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions from the commissioners? I'm sure there's a lot out there.
Well, it's kind of like a walking a tightrope, I suppose, between these, these various acts, federal voting rights acts and California's, because on the one hand, they're allowing, districts to be formed so that a majority that are minorities in that district are not in effect, have their vote diluted and in effect being, disenfranchised. On the other hand, in order to maintain that balance, there's, this need to consider replenishing those numbers while at the same time attempting to comply with the spirit of these various acts. And so it is a tightrope. It seems that one has to try and balance itself on.
I liked the use of the term play around the margins. We don't really know if by looking at adjacent districts adjacent to 1 and 3, we could achieve 2 majority Latino districts, but I understand also that we need to be careful about violating the Voting Rights Act and going strictly based upon ethnicity. We have to consider all aspects. So I agree, it's a delicate balancing, but it would be interesting to see what we do get by, as was said, playing around the margins of those districts.
Yeah, this is Doug Johnson, and just to kind of set expectations, playing around the margins is definitely not going to get you to 2 majority Latino districts, just because there are not the numbers there. But we can see what improvement can be done on the current numbers. I mean, obviously, Dr. Phillips did take these concerns into consideration when drafting these 3, and we can see kind of how far and how ugly does it get if we try to get the numbers a little bit higher or more than a little bit higher.
Am I seeing this correctly, that in order to effectively do this, to have 2 50% plus 1 districts with eligible Latino voters, citizen age voters, you'd really probably have to do a lot of changes in a lot of districts, move things around considerably to move some neighborhoods? Yes, Dr. Phillips is shaking his head. Yes, okay.
Yeah. So it would be, I haven't done this, but I could draw a test map, which just for the sake of exploration, look to see if it would be possible to draw 50% majority Latino districts. But based on my experience so far with looking at the data, they would be pretty non-compact and probably not adhere to neighborhoods very well.
Okay. Well, honestly, in many ways, that sounds like an effort worth doing if it's not too much work, because it would be demonstrative of the problem that we face.
And then to the extent that we could then compare it with loss of communities of interest and loss of potential even compactness, it would be very interesting to look at.
I think it would be very helpful for everyone to see. Yeah.
Yes, and Chair Johnson, if I might, it would be helpful to recognize Ms. Leone, but you are describing precisely the track we intended to follow with Judge Ochoa. We have a fact issue we need to grapple with before we start making decisions. Sorry, Marguerite.
Ms. Leone, good evening.
I think you're muted.
There we go. Thank you, City Attorney Colon, and with the permission of Chair Johnson, no sorries here at all. I think the proposal is a good one. You have a factual issue here. Number one, is there the community characteristics that would allow you to draw 2 districts that are majority Latino eligible voters? This would require there to be areas where Latino eligible voters are not already included in districts 1 and 3, but where their percentages exceed 50%. You have to have that base to get a district that's a majority Latino. You have to have a base of component parts that are majority Latino. And then once you explore that factual issue, the next questions are going to be legal. Let's say that you do identify one such block, but it's out in the northern part of the city. The legal question is the constitutionality of a tentacle that goes out there to pick up that block. And at that point, is your predominant consideration race? And I think as the proposal first to explore the factual issue is important. And I think what we're hearing from our consultants from NDC is it's going to be difficult. But I do believe it's worth the effort because we do have a settlement agreement we're working with. And that's the balance. What's factually feasible? What's factually possible? And then how is that evaluated under the law?
This is Doug Johnson. The only thing I would add to that is just some of the letters, and I haven't seen them yet, talk about if you can't draw lines that will be majority Latino, keep the current map. It's worth noting that the current map does not have any Latino majority seats in it.
That was my original question, that the shifting of time, and in all honesty, the way the last census was conducted may just not give us that.
Correct.
Anything else, Judge Kahn?
No.
Judge White?
No, thank you.
Okay. Does that give you enough guidance from us on our thinking, dealing with the things Mr. Colon and Ms. Leone were saying have to be done, and then some test map to see what it might even look like if we could factually do it?
I think it's a great start. I understand we're all concerned about the level of public participation thus far, but as I said before, you really have a tremendous amount of information with just the letters you have and the facts we know from NDC's presentation. So yeah, I think you're right on track from our standpoint.
Good. All right. Thank you, Dr. Phillips and Dr. Johnson.
And Honorable Chair, we do have public comment.
Go right ahead.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to public comment now. We have one speaker raise his hand, Judge Frank Ochoa. If there's anyone else in the attendees that want to speak, please go ahead and raise your hand. I'm going to unmute you, Judge Frank Ochoa, and then you can unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Baudet. Honorable members of the commission, I'll tell you, my primary concern was raised when I looked at the NDC presentation as it was posted, and particularly page 2 of the presentation, which talks about redistricting rules and goals. And it has a column for federal law, for California criteria for cities, laying out the general law provisions. And there's no mention in there in terms of the rules and goals of your task before you. Nothing is mentioned about the Banales case when the judgment in the Banales case contains the following language: the Independent Redistricting Commission shall adopt a redistricting map in accordance with the criteria set forth in paragraph 2 above. And paragraph 2 says that it's the intent of the parties to have 2 majority minority districts in the city of Santa Barbara. That is clearly should be a guiding principle in terms of the commission's activities. And we do have, as one of our committee members is a professor at UCSB. He is Dr. Danny Ebenstein, and he's worked on a number of these issues and drawing in maps. And he it's his opinion after a quick review of the maps and the presentation by NDC. He thinks that it would be possible to get to the stated goal of the the judgment and order from the Banyalas case. And my understanding is that Mr. Kalan has agreed that there will be communication between the NDC folks and Mr. Ebenstein, and they'll take a collective look at it. And it may be that things can be worked out and there is not an issue. But I would ask that NDC put the language into its presentation hereafter, wherever you think it's appropriate, probably in terms of maybe a column in between the federal laws and California criteria for cities, because we do have this lawsuit that is particular to the city of Santa Barbara. And I don't think it steps on the other general criteria that exist for drawing of legislative districts and other districts in the state when you have this kind of language in an order that binds the parties, and that includes the city of Santa Barbara in terms of its intent and goals. So I would ask that the redistricting rules and goals be clarified by insertion of language from the Banyalas judgment and order. I'd certainly be willing to work with Mr. Klon and the city's folks to effectuate that here from this point forward.
Thank you, Judge Ochoa.
Okay, next we have Lindsay Baker. And if there's anyone else in the public, please go ahead and raise your hand. Lindsay Baker, I'm going to unmute you. You may unmute yourself and begin.
I am Lindsay Baker speaking for myself. I am not addressing the major issue of this evening's discussion on the 50% majority minority district, but I would like to speak to having multiple representation in like on State Street area or the harbor. And a primary example in the city of Santa Barbara, there was the issue of developing auxiliary dwelling units in the high fire district. And the one representative for District 4 being in the high fire district was unable to vote and had to recuse herself because she lived in the high fire district to vote on any issues of ADUs in the high fire district, so that anyone living in the District 4 was not represented on the city council in their votes on the issue. So it is important sometimes to have multiple representatives for an area split. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker.
Okay, very good. Next, we have Megan Turley. I'm going to unmute you. You can unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hi again. So I just wanted to, again, commend you for the work that you're doing on this. I think you guys are asking the right questions, which is a fantastic start. I would really encourage you to get more clarity about whether or not there's a legal necessity to draw two minority majority districts. In the county process, we had to take a look at if there was racially polarized voting. So our Latinx communities in Santa Barbara were voting in distinctly different ways than other groups. I'm not sure if that's data that you'll have or have to look at, but I highly recommend taking a look at it if you can. And then I just wanted to remind the commission that you do need to consider communities of interest that may have commonalities in ethnicity or the language spoken at home. But as your council mentioned, using ethnicity or race as the only common element is not enough. You can't just put all Latinx people in one district just because they're of the same ethnicity. So keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Honorable Chair, I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. If there's no other public comment, anything else from the commissioners before we go on to the last point, or from our experts for that matter?
Honorable Chair, may I ask a question?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So the Honorable retired judge during his public comment made mention of minority majority district. And so I'm wondering, when it comes to drawing this test map, by minority, would you it may be more achievable to have a total minority district that is over 50%. And what I mean by that is you add those that are non-white, so Latinos, Blacks, Asians, Native Americans, and see if that could get to 50% plus. Or are you just concerned with the Latino population?
So let me just say that I picked up that language, I'm pretty sure, from the letter from Judge Ochoa's firm, because up until now, we had always been talking about citizen voting Latino population, not minority in general. And so I can't bring to mind exactly what the settlement says, although I think what Judge Ochoa just read used that language. So I don't know the answer to that, and I'll turn to Mr. Colon or Ms. Leone if you have any guidance on that, or maybe the commissioners do. I just don't know.
If I may, with the city attorney's permission, the lawsuit was brought on behalf of Latino voters. Mm-hmm. And I was just attempting to pull up the precatory language here to ensure to ensure we are on the same page, and have that language in front of us. It will take me just one moment to grab it here. I am confident in Judge Ochoa's representation of it, but it may be helpful to look at that language.
Well, and this is Doug Johnson. We can work with Ms. Leone or Mr. Colon to sort through the language and get that direction.
Well, it's a very important point because there are enough percentages of other minorities that could effectuate it. It's quite clear there's enough to push things over the line. That's not true. It looks a lot more likely that things could be pushed over into the majority line if we have a broader base to work with.
Chair Johnson, the settlement agreement at least specifically refers to Latino majority districts.
And it may be just a shorthand Judge Ochoa was using as well. It's just kind of a comfortable shorthand we might have fallen into. So.
Yes, and I'm reading directly, if I may, Chair Johnson, the intent of the parties is the electoral district map shall include 2 electoral districts in which Latino eligible voters constitute a majority of the eligible voters.
Okay.
So that is the language directly out of the settlement, creating total majority districts. There's a number of assumptions that were not subject to the lawsuit. Right. And I just wanted to mention that. So.
Well, I'm going to avoid that phrase. And I again, it was an unfortunate shorthand that I thought I picked up from the letter itself. So, okay. Anything else from anyone before moving on to the last agenda item? All right. Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. And so now is the time to discuss future agendas, in particular, if you would like to instruct the city to take on any additional tasks for you as you consider the future public hearings.
You know, you faded out a little bit in the middle there. I didn't hear everything you said. It's time for us to direct the city if what? I didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it either.
Oh, good. It's not just me.
Excuse me, sorry about that. So I wanted to provide also the input that in addition to discussing future agendas, if there's additional tasks that you would like to instruct the city to take on, especially considering this issue that we just discussed with NDC, please feel free to do so as well so that we can better prepare you for the future public hearings.
Well, let's start with the agenda part of this. I'm assuming that the next agenda will look a lot like this agenda. We'll have the next public meeting. There'll be whatever updates there are in the reports. There'll be public comments. Perhaps there'll be other publicly created maps to look at. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and though, Your Honor, I think that the commission might want to make sure our meetings are iterative. So if in your direction for future agendas, you could include the task we discussed working with Judge Ochoa and reporting back to you on the results of that mapping effort, that I think that would be really helpful. And I'm not positive we can accomplish that before your next meeting, but I think there's a fair chance that perhaps NDC can help us with answering that.
So at the last meeting, it was agreed that rather than keeping everyone in this loop, that I would be the one to set the agendas. And then if there's any problems with it, the other commissioners will let me know. So I would suggest that that be on the agenda, report back on efforts to work through the various issues Judge Ochoa has identified and the other letter writers for that matter. And I think we talked a little bit about asking for some sort of test map to be developed that would show what we might have to do with district boundaries to achieve the two 50% plus citizen voting age Latino populations for those. I think that would be helpful. Anything else the commissioners would like to have on that next agenda?
I think you've captured it.
Okay. Judge Khan?
Well, for whatever it may be worth, I'd like it to be known that we've certainly considered the letters and we're very much aware of the fact that there are mandates that have been required by the settlement in the lawsuit. And so whether technically NDC also includes that as a criteria, as a guiding principle, I think it's more important for this commission to understand and recognize that that's also goals and objectives that are part of the work that we do. And the very fact that we exist is a result of the settlement in that lawsuit.
I think it is good that this has been discussed and really brought to the forefront of our thinking in a way that it hadn't been for mine before, at least. But putting it in writing is always a good idea. Letting the world know that we recognize this. I think we've all been educated quite a bit in the last few days.
One other thing that I just thought of is our moving forward in terms of our forum. Where will we be? Will we be outdoors? Will we be Zoom? Will the pandemic have abated? I think that needs to be addressed, obviously.
Well, will our next meeting be anything before what would have been the public meeting at the elementary school? We don't have any other meetings scheduled before that one, right?
Correct, yes.
Do you feel the need to have some meeting in between now and then to discuss the format, either Zoom or in-person format issues?
I might be able to help. The cycle we're on here in Santa Barbara County has the county health officer reassessing things in the first week of the month. And I know this because we have been required by the open meeting law to have the council adopt resolutions monthly to continue these teleconferencing sessions lawfully. So we will know ahead of your February 12th meeting. I think that's what Ms. Sosa Acosta said. We will know ahead of that meeting what the county rules are, but only by a week or so.
Right. Okay. So I'm not sure if another meeting of the commission would serve any purpose. If we're going to be able to meet at the school, then everything is fine and we shall do so. If we're not, there doesn't appear to be a lot of time for you to find some other place.
I would like to discourage you, Your Honor, from not conducting your next meeting, even if it is online. I do think that, first of all, I think I owe Judge Ochoa an apology for not giving equal dignity to the settlement agreement. That was certainly not our intention. But secondly, I think even the discussion of the issues you've heard tonight is precisely the kind of medicine that will wake up the community.
You know, I wasn't suggesting we not have the February 12th meeting. I had asked if we should have some other meeting in the meantime to decide venue issues, but it sounds as if you're just going to have to make recommendations to us somehow. It's going to be what the county health people say it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from anyone in terms of agenda or things we would like staff to work on in advance of the next meeting? All right. Anything else on behalf of the city that you'd like us to take up?
And from our end, thank you.
Thanks. It was nice to have more public comment than we've had in the past. I felt a little bit more connected today since we had a variety of people. That was very nice. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
With hearing no objection, thanks everyone. Always nice to work with you. We'll see you on the 12th and look forward to the materials you generate in between. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.